There is a version of you that has been waiting. Not for the right moment, not for the right opportunity, just waiting. For permission. For someone to finally see what you've been carrying. For the day when everything that happened to you stops defining what you're able to do. You've read the books. You've had the conversations. You've done the journaling, the therapy, the long drives where you talk yourself through it all. And you understand yourself now. You really do. You can trace it back, the patterns, where they started, what created them. You know why you shrink in rooms where you should speak. You know why you say yes when you mean no. You know why you stay quiet, keep the peace, smile when something inside you is closing down. You understand all of it. And yet, here you are, still doing it. That's the part nobody has a clean answer for. The gap between understanding yourself and actually being able to change. The space between knowing what you do and being free enough to do something different. And I think that gap is where most people spend their entire lives. Think about the last time you stayed quiet when you should have said something. What were you actually telling yourself in that moment? There's a specific kind of exhaustion that comes from being the person who holds it all together. You are not the dramatic one. You are not the one who creates problems. You are the one who absorbs them, smooths them over, adjusts to keep things stable. And you've been doing this for so long that it doesn't even feel like a choice anymore. It just feels like who you are. You grew up learning that the safest version of yourself was the one other people were comfortable with. So you built that version, carefully. You got good at reading the room, good at knowing what people needed, good at making yourself smaller when things got tense. And here's the quiet part that most people never say out loud. There's a kind of safety in that. If you never fully show up as yourself, you never get fully rejected. If you're always adjusting, always flexible, always accommodating, then whatever happens isn't really happening to the real you. You're protected, in a way. But protection has a cost. The cost is that you stop living your own life and start managing everyone else's reaction to you. Your decisions are shaped by what people will think. Your words are filtered before they reach anyone. Your choices, where you work, who you're with, what you do on a Tuesday night get filtered through this constant background question, will this be okay with everyone? And at some point, years into this, you realize you've become very good at a life you didn't entirely choose. This is the kind of quiet suffering that doesn't look like suffering from the outside. From the outside, you look like someone who has it together. Considerate, low drama, reliable. But on the inside, there's this faint, persistent feeling, like you've been waiting your whole life to actually arrive somewhere, and you can't figure out what's keeping you. There's a book I want to talk about today. It comes out of Japanese philosophy, and it's built around the work of a psychologist you've probably never heard of, Alfred Adler. His ideas were almost the opposite of Freud's, and the book is called The Courage to be Disliked. The title sounds bold, but the book itself isn't loud. It's quiet and honest, and it asks some uncomfortable questions about why we live the way we do. Here's the first thing this book challenges, and it's probably the most uncomfortable one. You believe your past explains your present, not in a weak way, in a real, legitimate way. Things happened to you. They shaped you. That's not nothing. The family you grew up in, the things that were said to you, the moments that left a mark, those are real. And for most of your life, you've used them to explain why you are the way you are. Adler's position is harder to sit with. He says the past does not cause the present. You use the past to justify the present. There's a difference, and it matters. When you say, I can't speak up because of how I was raised, Adler would push back gently. He wouldn't say your childhood didn't affect you. He'd say, you are choosing right now, in this moment, to stay quiet. And you are reaching back into your past to explain that choice because it feels safer than admitting you're making it. That's not an accusation. It's actually a much more generous idea than it sounds. Because if your past caused your behavior, you'd have no way out. You'd be permanently shaped by things you didn't choose. But if your behavior is a choice, even an unconscious one, then you have the ability to choose differently. The question becomes, why would someone choose to stay stuck? And this is where it starts to get interesting. Most people don't stay stuck because they enjoy suffering. They stay stuck because staying stuck is working for them in some way they haven't fully looked at. Think about someone who wants to change careers, but hasn't. They're miserable where they are. They talk about leaving constantly, but they don't leave. And when you ask them why, the answers are always reasonable. I don't have the right skills yet. The market is bad right now. My family depends on the income. I'll start when the time is right. Adler would say, look at what those reasons are doing. They're protecting that person from having to try and fail. As long as they haven't tried, there's still someone who could have made it. The moment they try, that might not be true anymore. The anxiety is real. The fear is real. But the reasons are serving a purpose. And this is one of the most difficult things to accept. That the story you've been telling about why you can't change might be a story you've been telling on purpose, even if you didn't realize it. This doesn't mean you're weak. It doesn't mean you're broken or dishonest. It means you're human. It means your mind found a way to keep you safe. The problem is that what felt safe at 22 can feel like a prison at 35. And the way out isn't to find better explanations. It's to stop needing the explanations in the first place. Here's something Adler believed that sounds almost too simple at first. He said, all personal suffering, every form of unhappiness, comes from interpersonal relationships, not events, not circumstances, not what happened to you. The suffering comes from what happens between you and other people. Think about the things that have genuinely hurt you in your life, not physical pain, emotional pain, the kind that stays. Almost all of it has another person in it somewhere. Someone who didn't see you, someone who left, someone who judged you, dismissed you, compared you, used you. Even the loneliness that doesn't seem to be about anyone specific, it's loneliness because of the absence of connection. It's still interpersonal. And the flip side is also true. Almost everything that brings real meaning involves other people too. The conversations that changed you, the moments where someone understood something about you that you couldn't explain, the sense that your presence mattered to someone. We are completely tangled up in each other. But here's the part people miss. If all suffering comes from relationships, then the question isn't, how do I protect myself from other people? The question is, what am I actually doing in my relationships that keeps creating the same pain? Because most people are playing a very specific game in their relationships, and they don't know they're playing it. This game has a name. It's called living for other people's approval. And almost everyone in modern American life is playing it to some degree. You post something and wait to see how people respond. You give an answer in a meeting and watch faces to know if you got it right. You adjust what you wear, what you say, what you admit to feeling based on who is in the room. You filter yourself constantly, automatically, without even deciding to. And the exhausting part isn't the filtering itself. The exhausting part is that it never ends. There is no amount of approval that finally makes you feel secure. You get it, and the relief lasts a few hours, and then you need it again. You earn it from one person, and now you're worried about what someone else thinks. It's a system designed to produce anxiety, not peace. Adler calls this living to fulfill other people's expectations, and he says clearly, this is not your job. Other people's approval, their opinions, their judgments of your choices, those are their task, not yours. You do not have to manage them. You are not responsible for how someone feels about you. You are responsible for who you are. This sounds simple. It is not simple. It goes against almost everything we learned growing up about being a good person. We were taught that caring about others means caring how they feel about us. We were taught that a good friend, a good employee, a good partner makes people comfortable. But there's a difference between genuinely caring for someone and performing yourself for their approval. One is love. The other is fear in a polite costume. And most of us have been confusing the two for a very long time. There's a practical tool in this book that I think is the most quietly useful idea in it. Adler talks about something called the separation of tasks. The basic idea is this: before you react to anything, ask yourself, whose task is this? If you make a decision about your life and someone disapproves, whose task is that disapproval? Theirs. You made your choice, which is your task. What they feel about it is their task. You don't have to carry it. If you are honest with someone and they respond poorly, whose task is how they respond? Theirs. If you show up authentically and someone doesn't like the real version of you, whose task is that discomfort? Most of the weight people carry around isn't actually theirs. It belongs to someone else, but they picked it up because no one ever told them they didn't have to. Because picking it up felt like being responsible, like caring, like doing the right thing. Here's the question worth sitting with. How much of your daily mental energy is spent on tasks that don't belong to you? How much of your morning is spent thinking about how someone is going to react to something you haven't even said yet? How much of your evenings are spent replaying a conversation and wondering what someone thinks of you now? That is not thoughtfulness. That is living inside other people's heads and calling it care. The separation of tasks is not about becoming cold or indifferent. It's about knowing where your responsibility actually ends and having the honesty to put down what isn't yours to carry. This is where the book earns its title. If you stop living for approval, if you separate your tasks from everyone else's, if you show up as who you actually are, some people will not like it. That is not a possibility. That is a certainty. The coworker who benefited from you always saying yes will be confused when you start saying no. The family member who was comfortable with you small and manageable will push back when you start taking up more space. The friends who knew the version of you that agreed with everything will not know what to do with the version of you that has an actual opinion. And this is the exact moment where most people retreat. Not because they forgot what they learned, not because they stopped believing in the change, but because the discomfort of someone being disappointed in them feels unbearable. It feels unbearable because they never learned to separate their own worth from other people's reactions to them. Adler is honest about this. He says freedom, real freedom, the kind where you're actually living your own life, requires the courage to be disliked. Not the desire to be disliked, not the indifference to connection, but the willingness to risk disapproval in order to live with integrity. The people who seem most free, who make decisions without anxiety, who say what they mean, who don't spend hours managing perception, they're not fearless. They're not built differently. They just made a decision at some point that their own truth was worth more than someone's comfortable version of them. And that decision didn't come without cost. It came with uncomfortable conversations, with relationships that changed, with the unsettling feeling of not being liked by people you used to try to please. But on the other side of that discomfort is something that has no other entrance. I want to step back for a moment from all the ideas and say something simpler. What this book is really about, underneath all of it, is the question of who you're living for. And I think if most people answered that honestly, the answer would be uncomfortable. Because most people are not living for themselves. They are living in reaction to other people. They are making themselves acceptable, keeping themselves small, postponing their own choices until they get some signal that it's okay. They are waiting for the life that is actually theirs, and it never arrives, because you don't wait for that life. you choose it. Every day you don't choose it, you are still making a choice. You're choosing the version of yourself that someone else is comfortable with over the version that is fully, honestly you. And there's a grief in that. Years of being someone slightly smaller than you are. Years of knowing what you wanted and having 100 reasonable explanations for why now wasn't the time. The grief is real. Sit with it for a second. But here is also what's true. You are not your past. You are not the sum of what happened to you. You are not the version of yourself that got trained into smallness by years of adjusting. That version was a strategy, a very reasonable one, but a strategy, not a destiny. And you are capable of choosing something else, not perfectly, not all at once, but genuinely, today. Here's what I don't want to do. I don't want to end this by telling you to transform overnight. That's not honest, and it's not how this works. What Adler is pointing at is not a technique. It's a shift in how you understand where your life comes from. The old understanding was, my life is shaped by my past, and I am working within that. My patterns exist because of what happened to me, and my job is to manage them. The new understanding is, my life is created by my choices, right now, in this moment. The past is real, but it is not causal. I am the author, not of everything, but of more than I've been acting like. That second understanding is genuinely frightening for a lot of people because it removes the protection of the story. If the past isn't in charge, then you are. And being in charge means being responsible for what you do with this. The one practical thing this book asks for is very small but very specific. It asks you to notice in your daily life when you are living for someone else's task, when you are adjusting yourself, shrinking, filtering, performing. Notice it. Not to immediately do something different, just to see it clearly for what it is. Because once you see it, you can't entirely unsee it, and that is where the change actually begins. Not in a big declaration, not in a confrontation, but in a quiet moment where you notice what you're doing, and you ask yourself, whose task is this? And then, slowly, over time, you start to put things down that don't belong to you. You started this wondering about that gap, the one between understanding yourself and actually being free, between knowing your patterns and being able to move through them. Here is the answer, as honestly as I can give it. Understanding your patterns keeps you in the same relationship to them. You study them, you explain them, you trace them back, but you're still circling the same center. The center is, these patterns happened to me, and your job is to manage what happened to you. Freedom starts when you move to a different position entirely. When you stop being the person these patterns happen to, and start being the person who is choosing right now what to do next. The past did not make you who you are. You made yourself who you are, using the materials you had available. And today you have new materials, new understanding, new capacity to see what you're doing and decide something different. The courage to be disliked isn't a personality trait. It isn't something you have or don't have. It's a decision you make over and over in small moments to let someone's reaction to you be their responsibility, and to keep being yourself anyway. That's it. That's the whole thing. You don't need to be fearless. You don't need to stop caring what people think. You just need to care about your own truth slightly more than you care about their comfort. And that slight shift, that millimeter of difference, is what a different life is made of. If this landed differently than you expected, there's another conversation here you'll probably want to stay for.